Tales from the Lot, Episode 3. Thank you, sir. May I have another? Scott Barsamian is my guest today. He's here to talk about 9/1990 at MSG. Let's poke around. Hi, this is Tales from the Lot. I'm Will, and today my guest is Scott Barsamian of New York. We're going to be talking about 9/1990, the Grateful Dead at MSG. He was there. Thanks for being on, Scott. How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to talk about this night, one of the best musical experiences of my concert career.
Nice. How many shows did you see overall of the Grateful Dead with Jerry?
With the Grateful Dead, I was only able to see, if I was looking at my stats before we were talking about this. When I looked it up, I was only able to see them 38 times. I saw the Garcia Band 4 times. Yeah, I got to see them a little bit later in life than I thought, because the year that a lot of my friends started seeing the Dead was the fall of '88, when they did the 9-run, the 9-show run at the Garden in '88, and I was a freshman in high school. My parents knew what was up at the time. They're like, "We're not going to have you see the Dead. We know what goes on there." So fall of '88 went, and then the spring of '89, they really didn't do anything that close to where I live. Summer of '89, they came to Giant Stadium. My parents were like, "No, we still don't think you're ready to go." Fall of '89, they were at the Burn. I wasn't allowed to go. And then the spring of 1990, when I was graced with permission to go, I slept through the morning that tickets went on sale for Nassau Coliseum when they did the 3 nights at Nassau. Summer of 1990, the closest they came to me was in Buffalo. My parents were like, "There's no way you're driving to Buffalo." And then the September run, the 6-show run of MSG in 1990, I was allowed to go. They gave me their good grace, and they said, "Okay, you're able to go." So that was when I was finally able to see them. So I had a couple of opportunities, but I kind of blew it. So I figured better late than never.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay, so you were into the Dead before you made it to see him live. What got you there? What was the first album you bought? Like when you said, "I'm going to go out and buy a record," was it a Grateful Dead record, or what were you into before that?
My first musical album, believe it or not, I remember this clear as day. I was in first grade. It was 1981, and my first album that I remember getting as a present was Women and Children First by Van Halen. And then from elementary school to junior high, it was all about, I was all about Van Halen and Def Leppard, and then eventually U2 started to pop in. 1983, I remember buying Synchronicity by the Police, and then I'll never forget this. Great album. 1987, I was in junior high. MTV was actually still MTV when you could see videos, and that's when Touch of Grey was on. And I remember watching the video, and I'm like, "Why are these old guys on MTV?" And it was my uncle, of all people, and then eventually my mother were like, "No, these guys have been around for a long time." And I had no idea that, Touch of Grey was like the first top 10 hit for the Dead, and that's when you got into the whole concept of the touch heads, when you had like a new generation of Deadheads coming in. And then the summer of 1988, when I was going from 8th grade into 9th grade, I was walking home with a friend from like one of the local pool clubs, and we had like our little boom box with us, and we were listening to American Beauty, and I liked what I heard. I eventually bought American Beauty. I eventually bought Skeletons from the Closet. And then once I got to 10th grade, I was at a friend's house, and his parents had on vinyl Europe 72. And I remember putting the actual record player right onto the player. And then once the needle hit and the opening Cumberland Blues came on, there was a little bit of the crackle of the record, and it just blew me away. And what blew me away also is that it was live. And then, after Cumberland Blues, I'm like, this is really cool. And the defining song for me from Europe 72, which I thought was just perfection, was Jack Straw. Like, that was just one of those songs where it just got to me. And then eventually I went out, I bought What a Long Strange Trip It Is, and the version of St. Stephen on that. I remember listening to that till, the cassette player that I had was basically saying, "Thank you, sir, may I have another? Please stop this." And right about the time that I was getting ready to see the Dead live, at that point I had started getting into some tape trading. I started getting some of my first bootlegs, Cornell 77, the Springfield Creamery 72. And at that point, this was the summer of 10th grade for me. So the MSG run of 87 was already in circulation. So I remember hearing the Morning Dew, the Good Lovin', La Bamba, Good Lovin', and I was just like, this is awesome. And at that point, it's like I had gotten the music, but I really didn't know what it was like to experience seeing the band live. But I'd already known people who had seen them at that point, and that's when I'm like, I got to get out there and see these guys. But it took a little while, but eventually, I got my feet wet and got in there.
Yeah, that's how, I came from sort of that same era, growing up on Van Halen and Motley Crue and that whole mid-'80s thing. And I had a buddy who came back from... he went to school away somewhere and then came back. He's like, you got to go see this thing. It's not like anything that we've ever went to Deer Creek to see. I grew up 20 minutes from Deer Creek, so we'd seen a lot of shows, but he talked me into going, and I definitely never looked back.
Yeah, I was going to say, once you get there, especially if you're into what it's all about, that's when you're like, I got to keep doing this. It becomes addictive. It's one of those things where you just want to keep doing it.
It's like, there's people, all these people are actually happy. Like, they're happy people, like, all the time. And, you don't always see that in your day-to-day life, going to work and doing your thing. So it was cool to see a new way of life.
Yeah, once you're a part of it, you're able to actually, the happiness is almost palpable from what you're able to see with the people. It's like, it's something that you could almost touch. It's great.
For sure, yeah. So, so MSG, who all went with you? So September is probably a mild evening.
This was September 19th, 1990. I remember this clear as day. It was a Wednesday. And I remember that I was in 11th grade. I was 15 years old. And I remember waking up that day and I'm like, I'm finally going to get a chance to see the Grateful Dead in person. And I just remember in school that day, I was just buzzing because there was just the anticipation of knowing that we're going to be going down there. So everybody that I went with was 15 at the time, so nobody was able to drive. So my buddy Mike's mother drove us down. It was me and about 4 or 5 of my other buddies, and I'll never forget this. It was raining that day because normally once we started seeing the Dead at the Garden in 90, 91, there was no Garden in 92, but they were back there in 93 and eventually 94. Usually that point in September, it was always hot out. You would always get one of those Indian summers, but this particular day it was raining. And I remember we were driving down the Palisades Parkway, which is like the main parkway that you get to the George Washington Bridge. And I remember driving down, we saw a couple of cars that would pass us that had Still Your Faces or Dancing Bears with skeletons on them. And it was cool because even though we were getting driven down by my friend's mother, it was that cool feeling that you were a part of something and you were all going to the same place. And so we got dropped off in front of the Garden, and right across the street from the Garden is the big parking garage, the big parking lot. So we got dropped off in front of there, and we knew some people that were going to be there. So we walked into the garage, and you kind of walk up this big circular driveway to get to the area where there were people that we knew that were going to be there. And we got to the parking lot, and I just remember getting out of the car that was right in front of us where we got dropped off. They were just blasting a live version of Iko Iko. It was a really good audience tape, and I just remember hearing Garcia's guitar and this copy, particularly the audience tape. You could just hear like the roar and the energy of the crowd. And I just remember just feeling so overwhelmed with, wow, I'm going to be seeing these guys live soon. And we hung out in the garage for a bit until it was time to go into the Garden. But the one thing that really struck me was that I'd never seen the Dead live before. And I remember there were a couple of people periodically, they're walking by with their fingers up in the air. And I'm like, are these people telling us that they're number one? And like, I had no idea that, I had no idea that these were people that were looking for tickets. And then we eventually caught on to, wow, these people need tickets. And like, we felt fortunate that we had tickets. Here we are, 15-year-old, dopey, 11th grade kids in high school. And then we have adults walking around looking for tickets. And at that point, I felt kind of fortunate that I'm like, wow, I'm not going to have to be that guy looking for a ticket. But it was just a great feeling to know that we were in that night. And once we once we were just taking a look at what was going on around us, it was just such an overwhelming feeling of, I can't wait to get inside the garden. Because at this point, we were hanging out in the parking lot, and we were just watching the people go by. And that's when you started to see people with all the different, lot T-shirts. This was 1990. So the Simpsons were very big. So Bart Simpson was like the big, topic of all the T-shirts that were being sold on lot. And, if you go by today's standards, I'll never forget this. There were people selling nitrous balloons that looked like punching bags. 2 for $5. 2 for $5. I'm like, wow, talk about inflation nowadays. But we were like, wow, this is really cool. They're selling balloons. And then someone's like, no, this is nitrous oxide. And then, we were 15 years old. So, we experimented and we found out, wow, I guess this is why everybody's chasing after the guy that has the balloons. But it was just, as somebody going in for the first time that kind of knew what they were going to expect with the music, it was just such a great feeling, just being young, and that people have been doing this already for years, and you're like, now, this is my chance to now be a part of that experience. And it was just such a great feeling to know that, in an hour or two, we're going to be walking in there, and then once the lights go out, it's just going to be a matter of whatever the band decides to play, which was just such a great feeling.
For sure. And it's, like you mentioned, the people with their fingers in the air, and like any culture, they have their own idioms and their own way, secret language, if you will, of just things, and that you would only hear in that setting. So that was a cool thing you're in on those things once you get there, and it's kind of
you're in on that because you walk outside the parking lot. There are people that have their finger up in the air, but they're trying to hail a taxi cab. But you look, you look at the other people who are there. They have a tie dye on. They look like somebody who's not trying to flag a cab down. It's like they're doing whatever they can to get inside to see the music. They want to catch what you're going to be a part of, what you're catching, which was just cool.
You got into did you have decent tickets? Where were you at? Were you up in the nosebleeds or the chase section?
we actually had the tickets that we had, I think were in the 200s, but this is when the garden still had the concourse. So we walked into the garden and it was just like a big mob of people. I just remember looking around and, Grateful Dead concerts, one of the best possible places to people watch. I mean, you see anybody that you can think of, you're going to see somebody that looks like that. So I just remember just being in the mob of people waiting to get in. And, this is pre 9/11. So, security was, what security? Somebody just looked at your ticket and they let you in. And I just remember walking in, we took the elevators up, we got to the 200 section, and this is when the garden still had the concourse. And we did a complete 360 of the garden just to kind of walk around to see what it was like. This was my first time being at Madison Square Garden for a concert, not the circus when I was a kid. And we were on the left side of the stage, and we were just kind of parked there. And we had the best overall view from where we were. Security just wanted to make sure that we weren't doing anything, illegal, or they wanted to make sure there was no riffraff going on. And we just parked right on the concourse on the left-hand side of the stage. So if you're looking at the stage at the view of a clock, we were probably at the 8 o'clock part. And it was just a perfect view. And there were people next to us who were our age. There were people who were much older than us. I remember talking to a guy that was asking me, "Is this your first show?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And this guy was telling me about seeing the Dead at the Felt Forum for MSG in 1971, and you just felt like you were a part of history, and it was just so welcoming. I just remember the guy just being very open. He was asking me about, what songs do you like? What are your favorite albums? We started talking about tapes. And eventually we were just like, okay, we're here. And then it was just that anticipation for the lights to go down. And it was just, I just remember just being a big goosebump being there, just waiting for the lights to go down and just waiting to see, what is the band going to do tonight? Because this was the second to last night of the 6-night run. I remember hearing about what they were doing for the set list. The first night, I think, was Bruce Hornsby's first show with the band on the fourth. Yeah, that was 9/14/90. Yep.
Yeah.
So, Bruce was still getting his chops with the band. We already knew that Vince Welnick was the new keyboard player. I remember when we were getting tickets for this run, this is right about the time that Brent died. And then, the big rumor was, are they going to do a fall tour? And I'm like, now's my chance to see the band. And, and who knows if they're going to play. So I was able to finally get the tickets. And just being in there, it was just the overall anticipation of, come on, let's do this. And it was just great. I just remember thinking the whole time, I'm going to be seeing the Grateful Dead in person. And it was just such an intense, happy feeling of just, this is awesome. I just remember just being so happy that I was there. And, I think the week after next, it's going to be the 31st anniversary of this. I mean, every year I always listen to the show. It was just that much of a happy, big deal for me that night.
Okay. So, speaking of, it was a switch over to Vince. So it was kind of the same, but kind of a new sound going in there with Hornsby filling up so much of the space, and it was same band, different sound. And were you impressed? What did you think of the changes versus when Brent was with them a few months earlier?
The one thing I remember about Bruce particularly is that this night when they opened up with Jack Straw, I don't know if there were problems with the mix, but Bruce's vocals were very loud, and his piano just really seemed to be high in the mix. And it was just great because I already knew who Bruce Hornsby was, and I knew that he was a great pianist. I knew that he was a great artist. And, going back to elementary school with the song The Way It Is, it's like you knew that you were going to be seeing a guy that knew what he was doing. And eventually when he joined the band and continued playing with them, he just brought something that was just so good and so different. And when you even look at some of the video footage of some of the shows, it's almost like Bruce brought so much out in Jerry. And watching them play was just incredible. And that night, just hearing Bruce's vocals on Jack Straw, the opening song, it was just an intense feeling of, this is great. It's like I'm seeing the band that I love. I know who Bruce Hornsby is. I know what he is all about, and I know what he's capable of doing. And like right out of the gates when they opened up with Jack Straw, you had that feeling like this is going to be a great show. It was just such a great feeling to just hear him, and you could almost feel just the vibe that he had with the band once they opened up with that number. It was spectacular.
100%. That's a monster, Jack Straw. And when I listened to it preparing for this, I listened to an audience tape, and when you hear Bruce's voice come in, the crowd just erupts. The whole once he gets into the keep on rolling, it's so prominent in the mix. And when Jerry does that solo, it's like it's electrifying. Like you could just feel just the energy coming out of his guitar, and the whole climax of that song, knowing how much Hornsby had to do with that, tying into Garcia's guitar, it was just phenomenal. Everybody has their favorite version. I'm not sure what the best version is because it's all based on personal opinion, but if you want to talk about one of the best Jack Straws of the 1990s, I always throw people to 1990. That's just such a solid, powerful, perfect version. And adding Bruce Hornsby to that just makes it, that's like the cherry on top of the sundae right there. 100%. By the time that they get to the end of that, it's just like a freight train rolling that thing. What a great version. And then, the drummers, especially on the tape I listened to, or the source I listened to, were just really carried it that night. I felt like they didn't lag at all. They were really just pushing, and when the Bertha especially was just moving.
Oh yeah, the way the Bertha starts, because right after Jack Straw, everybody, I remember being like, oh my God, I can't believe how well they played that. And you hear Jerry doing the subtle strumming of Bertha, but once he just goes into it, he's just so locked into that. And just the playing that night on Bertha, especially the soloing, it was my first show, but you just felt that the band was just locked in. It was one of those things where, the momentum that they had for the first set. I'm sure a lot of people had high expectations for the for the second set, but the first two songs, it was like a 1-2 punch. It was like, wow, what are they going to do next? Because everything just seemed to be played so perfectly and so tight, and they just seemed so locked in. It was just great.
Yeah, it sounded like they probably went through a ton of rehearsals, getting Vince up to speed and Hornsby as well. So, it really showed. And I don't know, are you seeing any Dead and Company shows these days?
I haven't. The last time I actually saw the Dead was the Fare Thee Wells in 2015. I haven't had the chance to check out any of the Dead. I've listened to them, but I haven't had the chance to see them in person.
Yeah, listening to this Bertha in particular, and then listening to a Bertha these days, it's like, let's pick it up a little bit.
Yeah,
half that speedy Bertha speed would be cool. So,
you definitely get the vibe. You can appreciate what they're trying to do, but if you go from like now to like what was happening back then, it's different.
Yeah, it is. It's a different band. It's a different situation, and it's a different age group. So we'll cut Mickey and Billy some slack back there, I guess.
It's different, but like the best thing about Dead and Company today is that they're still doing what they have a passion for, and even if people that are seeing Dead and Company today didn't get the chance to see a Jerry. At this point, look, it is what it is, but you're still seeing original members, 50 plus years into this, and they're just doing what they love to do. So if you're there to see live music at this point, it's a win-win situation.
It's a good time no matter what, for sure. For sure. So, yeah, okay. So then they get into the country hour with me and my uncle in Big River, and I always like that, whether it's that or Mama Tried or Mexicali. It's an always nice Bob pickup moment there in the middle.
And what was that me and my uncle, if you listen to that, because I was going to say the audience tape that you're listening to, I have probably 6 different sources of this concert on my hard drive. I have a couple of soundboards. I have a Matrix. I have an Ultra Matrix. There are a couple of different audience sources that came out. Me and my uncle, it's one of the most played songs that the Grateful Dead have done. This version that night, it's just so hot. It's so tight. Again, the band is so locked in. And for something that just seemed so ubiquitous as a song in setlist, you hear this version that night and you're like, this is on fire. And then the transition into Big River and the solo that Garcia does in that version, it just kept getting better. And you thought at some point, is the band going to do something to maybe, slow things down, cool things off? And everything that they played that night was just done, just balls out. It was just, they just basically on all cylinders they were firing, and they just kept going. And, like you said, for the country hour, me and my uncle Big River, 2 songs that go way back. Me and my uncle goes back to the very beginnings of the Grateful Dead. Yeah. Big River is one of the older songs too, and just the tenacity and just the focus that they play on those 2 songs was just great. I just remember at that point, like, you're 4 songs into the show, and I just remember, I think I'm getting the hang of like how to dance for this, and I feel like you were starting to try to figure out like what can I do to keep up with the pace of the music, because the music was just so intense, and to keep up with that was just almost a chore at some point. But I just remember that I just pictured, like as a metaphor, just like electricity flying out of Garcia's guitar after those first 4 songs with the solos that he did. And just the leads that he had on that, and it just kept getting better. It was just phenomenal.
And speaking of the momentum, they go into it must have been the Roses, and I don't know if you've noticed this. I'm sure you have because you've listened to this a ton of times. But the first verse, the drummers are so got so much momentum going. They play the first verse double time. And
I was going to say it seemed a little speedy, and like when you hear the way the drumming goes with the tempo of the song with Garcia's guitar, it's almost like the drummers are like, "Wait, what do you mean we have to slow down?" But for a '90s version of that song, like you think about the song when it first came out in '74, it was kind of upbeat. It kind of had a little bit of like pizzazz to it, and then it eventually mellowed out over the years. But I just remember hearing that song And I'm like, this is a slow song, but it felt fast just by the way that the band was playing it, which was great.
It was just that first verse too. I feel like, I realized as I was getting set up today that this show's on YouTube, so I should have popped that up. But I, as I was listening to it, I had this feeling like Jerry probably looked back and said, slow down or something.
Yeah, it's like, come on, guys, hit the brakes.
But I want to hear a whole version where they play the drums like that, just because it was so cool. And I was listening, and then it slowed down, and I was like, wait a minute, I got to go back and did I really just hear what I think I heard? And that was really cool, but I never really explored that much after.
And it's interesting because of that, because when you're talking about a band that is known for their improvisational skills, to start fast and then be able to work into how the guitar player wants the lead to go, and they slow things down, you're just able to see just what musicianship they have to be able to, start a little bit fast and then just kind of tone things down a little bit. But for a 90s version especially, it's such a solid version. And, his vocals throughout the first set especially were just so on point. You'd figure by the second to last night, you thought that maybe Jerry's voice would be, a little bit shot. Maybe he would try to ease things up a little bit, but he just seemed to go in 110% for every show at that point.
Yeah, I mean, Stuck Inside a Mobile crushes, super speed, and then closing out the first set with Help Slip Franklin.
Yeah, the Help Slip Franklin's, because if you take a look at the timing of that particular Help Slip Franklin's, I think that was one of the longest Franklins of the year that was played. And I remember listening to a lot of versions of Franklin's Tower. These were older versions up to the night that I saw them, but some of the versions that I listened to from the early 80s, they weren't as long. And I just remember at one point, I'm like, this song keeps going. I mean, I think it pushes almost 14 minutes long, and you're suddenly thinking that you're listening to a 70s version when they really dragged it out. And the one thing about the Franklins that I really specifically remember is that Phil in the mix just completely kept that Franklin's, groove down. And the way that Garcia was able to do his soloing, and Hornsby's work on that is great. And I feel like Phil was a little bit, overlooked by people, by people's listening ears, to just be able to hear that this, he's keeping the groove for this whole song. And, combined Help to Franklin's, I mean, you're talking close to 25 minutes of music there. And the Slipknot too. I mean, Jerry's got some great guitar work on Slipknot too. And, the Franklins, being the longer of the three songs. But I mean, the whole thing, it just worked. And to end the first set like that, you get that feeling like you're going back to something in the 77 era for something that. Because
those written out parts in Slipknot especially are some of the tightest playing I've heard. I mean, they really nailed, the change from the end of Slipknot into Franklin's. Everything they did in between the two written sections of Slipknot was great, but just the way that they all just hit that rhythm, played the lines, and were so in sync. It was definitely one of the tightest Slipknots I've heard.
Yeah, everything for that worked, and I just remember being there. The moment that you get the sieg from Slipknot into Franklin's Tower, and just the eruption of the crowd, because that they're going into Franklin's, and I just remember, my little 15-year-old brain being like, I know this song. One of the first versions I heard of Franklin's Tower was from Dead Ahead, and that was one of the first songs that really got me. And to just be there, with 18, 20,000 people, whatever the capacity was, and to just see, all the guys on stage just have the audience in the palm of their hands, and for them, something that would be so simple to go from one song into another, to make that really, for them, basic transition, and just see this overwhelming roar of applause and happiness, and that you're going into this song. It was great, and that's probably, for the 90s, that's probably one of my go-to versions of Help Slip Franklin's. It's such a great version, especially to end set one too.
It's just a great show, man. I mean, you're lucky to have been there to catch this for sure. I mean, they open up with a fiery playing in the band, and I mean, just the whole night from what I was listening to, Jerry's channeling his inner Al Di Meola or something. I mean, he's just just shredding, like how, like speedy licks everywhere. It's crazy.
Yeah, the guitar work that he did that whole night, like when you get into 90s Grateful Dead, as you start to go a little bit further into like 92, 93, towards the end, you hear that the band were, consistently inconsistent, from stuff that you listen to, especially from spring 1990, summer 1990, fall 1990. Like the band just seemed to be riding that high that they had from 1989. Like 1989, one of my favorite years of the Dead to listen to. And, I feel like a lot of people had higher expectations for the second set based on the way that they played for the first set. And once they opened up with playing in the band and, they went into playing into Ship of Fools, and they went back into playing into, like, at that point, I feel like everybody was like, they're going there. They're going to that place that maybe some people that were a little bit, not 100% on that the band was going to go that way. But I mean, they just went, and the thing that really blew me away, because I think I maybe heard the song 2 or 3 times, because I didn't have a copy of Wake of the Flood, and a lot of the tapes that I started collecting were more of late 80s, early 90s. I wasn't really that familiar with Let It Grow. I knew the song, and then once they went into Let It Grow in the second set, and people were going nuts, and I'm like, wait, I know this song, but I did know the significance that was the first time that they did a second set Let It Grow, I think, since 1986. And it's a great version because they extend it out, and then at the end of that song, you get like an extra 10 minutes on the tape that I have. It's labeled the Bruce, Bob, and Jerry Jam, where you just have the 3 of them on stage, and you really get a perfect picture of what Hornsby is able to do when he's improvising, especially with Bob Weir and Jerry Garcia. And it's just the perfect segue to end that song, have them do 10 minutes of their own noodling around, and then they go right into Drums in Space, which was just a perfect way to end the pre-drums portion of that set.
It was. I think personally Let It Grow belongs in the second set if they're going to do it like that. I mean, like, that was truly an amazing Let It Grow. That last few minutes of those 3 is one thing. When I was listening to that, Bob is not real present the whole time. It's a lot of Jerry and Bruce going back and forth, and you hear a little Bob here and there. And I remember as I was listening to it, I hear Bob play this kind of couple chingy weird chords that Bob plays sometimes, and then all of a sudden Jerry's just like all over the top of him with these like
really he's like cool beating chords. He kind of beats him over the head with that. You get like the little bit of like the twanginess of Weir, and then you just get the heavy hitting Garcia, and then Bruce Hornsby is there to kind of like mellow everything out, but just keep everything together. Yeah, and that's kind of the way.
Yeah. It took off.
That's kind of the way that they've played. You get the light hitting. Weir's like the jabs, and Garcia's like the haymaker. But it works into just be like that big punch combo. And Bruce Hornsby adding to that was just perfect.
Yeah. I'm a sucker for Hornsby, especially. I'm not as big a fan of the range, but I think the things that he did after leaving the Dead and kind of changing up the sound, and those 2 albums especially he did right after Harbor Lights, and I can't think of the one right after, the Hot House, I think it's called. Fantastic albums. So yeah, I'm kind of a sucker for that Hornsby thing, that he does with those huge chords. And
you're just able to see what a versatile musician Bruce Hornsby is. Like, as somebody that plays the piano, the keyboards, whatever, he's labeled as on albums. The accordion, I mean, you put Bruce Hornsby in a room with people that can play music, and you're going to get great music, because he's just that talented to be able to do that. And it just shows just how well-rounded of a musician that he is. And it's just great that, we had the chance to see him perform that way, live especially. And the fact that he's still going and he's still playing music is just one of those things that you're just happy to say, that you could say not only did you see him, but he's still doing it, and you can still hear what he's producing, which is great.
Yeah, and he's still got the curse, as he calls it. I just saw him recently here in Denver. He played downtown 3 years ago or so, and there was definitely a lot of hippies there. So he definitely is able to attract, especially people that know Hornsby from the Dead. I mean, I remember, the first time I was able to figure out who Bruce Hornsby was
there was that cheesy Kevin Bacon movie called Whitewater Summer. And On the Western Skyline is one of the songs from that. And I remember watching that movie eventually. I'm like, this is Bruce Hornsby. And I'm like, this is a great song, but it's in a cheesy Kevin Bacon movie. But, you know, if you like the movie, at that point, it doesn't matter. You know, if you like the song, you like the song.
That's all it is, for sure. For sure. That was a pretty good drum space. It was like space, drum space. And Hornsby kind of hung on with the drummers there, too, for a while. So that was kind of cool. And I like it when... Mickey, I don't know whether it was the beam or what it was that Mickey creates sort of that wah 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 wah. Like,
yeah, you get that heavy wah wah. Yeah, it's almost like the heavy. It's like the heavy wah wah nitrous sound almost, and it kind of just it kind of like reverbs throughout the garden. I remember drum space was. I remember it being loud. I remember it was mellow, and there were points when it got intense and it leveled off and it got back up there. And I just remember that a lot of people that were normally just going to be sitting down for drums in space, because like once the drum part kind of mellowed out and the space part began, a lot of people near me who normally were sitting were standing up because they were just waiting to see what the band was going to do once they came out of space. And I just remember, you know, when the rest of the band came out from behind the stage, they got onto the stage and then they went into Going Down the Road Feeling Bad, and like that kind of just got everybody out of like that little bit of a lull that space can kind of bring into. And the Stella Blue that night, like that version, it's such a pretty version. It's powerful. The vocals are great. You know, Jerry's
and the quiet part in that.
Yes,
the quiet part was like, you know, like I said, I was listening to an audience tape and it was silent.
Yeah, it's one of those moments. Yeah, it's like you're in Madison Square Garden and you could like literally hear a mouse pee on cotton. Like, you know,
it was just
it's that quiet. And, you know, when Jerry does the solo and just the way that his guitar works in that, it was just great. And I mean, the one thing that I'll never forget about the concert was, you know, when the whole band came out once the lights went down, you know, Jerry comes out and under the white lights, you just see the hair. You know, you just see this white hair, you see the black outfit, you see the darkness. And then, you know, once they're ready to get into the first song, because right before Jack Straw, they were definitely tuning up for a bit. And, you know, at this point, there were people near me that were like, they haven't played Jack Straw yet. It's Jerry night. It's his night to open. And they went into that, and that just kind of was like the beginning of this just fantastic musical experience that happened that night. And like, you know, going right up to Stella Blue, it just kept going. And like you said, the quiet part, I just remember you could feel the silence. You know, it's like you're in a room with thousands and thousands of people who were screaming and dancing and having the greatest time. And they're the moments during the songs where they know to let the musician do his thing, and you're just going to go along with it. So people almost knew that this is the part. Look, let Jerry do it. You know, let him do his thing. Let his voice speak to us. Let his guitar speak to us, and then we're going to know when to get back into our groove. And that was that's one of my favorite versions of Stella Blue. I mean, I'm biased because I was there, but like you said, you know, you listen to it and you could hear it and you can feel it, and it was just great.
I wasn't there, but it is one of my favorite versions now too.
Yeah, it's such a pretty version. It's so pretty.
Yeah, I love that song. Yeah. Then what they have the Around and Around, close it out with a rocker, and then you know, I like it. I like how the Grateful Dead would always tell you were at a good show by the encore. So you're gonna get like Bid You Good Night or Mighty Quinn or something. You're not going to get Liberty on a show like this.
Exactly.
There was no Liberty, but...
Yeah, there's no Liberty. There's no I Fought the Law. And because I think it was the second night, I think it was Bruce's first night on the 15th, they did The Wait. Because, you know, like once, like, you know, like The Wait eventually became one of those songs where, like, you know, hey, we played a great show. We're going to give you an encore where everybody's going to get their chance to sing. And I remember that the Grateful Dead tapes that I had at that point, the bootlegs, none of them had Mighty Quinn as an encore. I didn't have any of those tapes yet. I remembered Mighty Quinn from hearing it on the radio by Manfred Mann. So, like, as soon as they went into it, I'm like, this is the song I know that I listened to in the car with my mom when she's listening to the oldies station. But, like, you know, I've heard it so much. And I just remember that the fans just were so appreciative. And I just remember like jumping up and down with the excitement that I know this song. Like, you know, the fact that it's not one of their songs, but it's a song that I've known for years at this point. You know, for years at this point, I knew it word for word. You know, there were times when I started seeing the Dead more, like, you know, for the part when they say when everybody's going to want to doze, you know, everyone thought that Jerry said everyone's going to want to dose. And I'm like, wait, is everyone cheering because they're talking about acid? But, you know, it was just, it was just a play on with the way that it was, that it was sung. But after they did the encore, I just remember, you know, feeling the intensity of the music. You could just feel just the overall vibe of the Garden. And after that, I just remember saying to myself, I got to see these guys more in concert. And like, now that I was at the age and my parents were allowing me to do that, you know, that following, you know, the following months in October, they went off to Europe, and then they did their shows out west in Colorado and eventually California. But I remember the following year in '91, when they came to the East Coast for the spring, once I knew that tickets were going on sale and I knew that my friends were going to be going, I'm like, I got to get back to start seeing these guys. And that's when it became, you know, I was eligible to see, you know, shows on the spring tour and the summer tour and the fall tour. And I kept at it until the end. And I'm just so happy that I was able to be a part of it. And it's great to be able to talk to people that didn't get the chance to see Garcia, to just let them know what it was like. And, you know, as you were talking about Dead and Company before, you're not seeing the Dead with Garcia, but you're seeing the music that he loves so much. And even though he's not there, you know, 50 plus years later, they're still holding that torch for people to get the chance to experience what it was like. And I think everybody, whether you're able to see Garcia or not, but you're seeing a band that does the Dead songs, you're in a good place. And it's great that it's great that you're able to see that and experience it. And if you have that good of a time one night, you might be prompted to say, you know what, I'm going to see him another night, or I'm going to go on tour, or, you know, it's just one of those things where, you know, I was hooked when I heard them over the radio and over a speaker, but, you know, you see them in person, and for me, it was just a game changer.
Hey now, do you have a great story about a Grateful Dead show you were at? I'd love to hear it. Visit my page at facebook.com/talesfromthelot and send me a message. Let me know what show you would like to talk about and a little about why it was so special to you.
And I'm just so happy to have been able to experience, you know, every night that I saw the Grateful Dead play. I saw a handful of Jerry Garcia band concerts throughout that run. And, you know, when I went to see the Fare Thee Well shows at Soldier Field, I was able to go for the first two nights. You know, granted, you're seeing the 50th anniversary of the Grateful Dead. The main guy who should be there isn't there. I thought Trey from Phish did a fantastic job, but it was just nice to be able to just have that feeling again, even though, you know, the main person that should be there wasn't. You were reliving, you know, that moment. And for me, going from 1990 to 2015, you know, you're talking 25 years later, and you're like, wow, I still feel the same way that I did when I saw them for the first time when I was 15. And I'm just happy Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the spirit's still there.
So when you talk about the spirit that, you know, even though that this person's not there, he's still living on, like you just said with the spirit, you're still able to feel that spirit through the music, and you're able to see what was able to be done to just have so many people come to the same place for the same reason, to experience the music, the community, the happiness, and overall to just be a part of something that makes you happy.
For certain. Yeah. That's honestly, that's why I do this, is, you know, for those people who weren't there to hear about what it was like, and for us who were there just to try to remember what it was like.
Yeah, totally.
You know, so, you know, it was definitely a good time, and something that'll be hard to replicate exactly like it was. I mean, there's definitely some good scenes out there, but nothing like the good old Grateful Dead, you know?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny that you're like, you know, there's certain things you can't remember. It's like, I couldn't tell you what I wore that day, but I remember that people sold nitrous 2 for $5. Like, that was just something that stuck out because I'm like, what are these big balloons for? And I'm like, oh, I'm like, this is why they're doing it. And I'm like, all right, here we go.
Yeah. We'll try it out.
One in Rome.
Yeah, totally. Well, thank you, Scott, for being on. I appreciate you coming on and tell us about your experience. Obviously, I know why you picked this one. It's a fantastic show. I'm jealous of you. My first show was 6/7/91 at Deer Creek. And,
okay.
Fantastic show. Also, Hornsby was there, so that was my one shot at seeing Hornsby with them. And I know that feeling of walking in and just the awe and. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that with us, man.
Thanks. I was going to say thanks for having me. It's great, especially for, being able to experience the Grateful Dead. Like when you eventually go in and you know what to expect, but you still don't know what you're going to get based on the songs. It's just, one of the reasons why everybody just tried to see them as much as they can. And I wish we could still be seeing them, but, we still have the live music. Thank God for the internet now with the tapes. And it's just something that, we could just keep using as a reference just to remember the moments that we experienced and to talk about it. And I'm sure, you could say the same thing I can, like, people that I know to this day I've met through the Grateful Dead and being able to travel and see different parts of the country, all based on driving to see a band. But like at the end of the day, like, it's a bigger picture than that.
There's probably nothing that influenced my life from that point forward more. Honestly, like the Grateful Dead really changed my trajectory. Had I not gone there, there are so many things in my life that would be different today. So, yeah, they're definitely an important thing for a lot of people. Yeah,
because I was going to say, as I sit here, right on my desk, I have my, I got my Jerry picture. So he's a part of my life. At some point every day, I've got the Grateful Dead playing at some point. It just shows just how much of an impact on, someone's life they can have. And I'm just one of, thousands upon thousands of people who've experienced the same thing. And it's great. And I'm just glad that we're still able to hear the music, share the music, talk about the music. And I'm really happy to have been able to talk to you about this because pretty soon in another 8 days, a week and a day, we're going to come upon the 31st anniversary of this show. And when I get home from work, I'm going to have a moment that night when I have to put 3 hours aside and just relive it and listen to it from the tuning of the first set, down to the last note of the encore. And I've been doing that ever since I got the tape.
Nice. That's awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. It was good.
Yep.
All right, good talking to you. Be well, and I'll speak to you soon.